In the 5th year of our marriage, the impoverished student I had sponsored became my husband's secretary. In the 6th year of our marriage, my husband bought a villa for the secretary's dog. It was all because the secretary posted in her social circle, "My dog is my baby. Whoever gives it a home is its daddy." Within 3 days, the secretary posted a photo in her social circle. It was a photo of a man and a woman's hands holding a white Samoyed. The caption read, "Our little family of 3. The man's hand was wearing a wedding ring identical to mine. I casually liked the post, and it was quickly deleted. Minutes later, my husband, who hadn't been home for half a month, called me angrily, shouting, "Is it just because your shares in the company were taken back? I've already told you that in terms of professional skills, Jill is better at managing the company than you. Are you bored out of your mind, sending her nasty messages?" I could faintly hear delicate sobs in the background. I was confused, and before I could explain, the call was abruptly ended. Half an hour later, Jill posted again in her social circle, flaunting the contract for the shares that had just been taken from me. The caption read, "If he loves me, he will give me everything he has. If he doesn't, he won't." At the end, she painstakingly tagged me. I smirked as I took a screenshot for evidence. So young and impatient. She doesn't understand that in the face of interests, love is insignificant. Chapter 1. When Larry called suddenly, shouting at me, I was contacting the best lawyer, preparing to file for divorce. Just 2 weeks ago, Larry took away my 20% stake in the company, citing my illness. He claimed it was to let me rest well and not worry about the company. But then he turned around and bought a luxurious villa for Jill's dog. The bank card was with me, and the transaction notification was sent to my phone, leaving me stunned for a few seconds. He spent millions without batting an eye. Yet, half a month ago, when I asked him for $5 million to buy a special medicine that could increase my chances of recovery, Larry refused without a second thought. He said, looking troubled, "Sally, you know the company is in a tough spot right now. If it weren't for massive layoffs, it would be in a financial crisis. In this situation, where can I get $5 million to buy you special medicine? You need to bear with it." With that, he grabbed his coat and left. He didn't come back for half a month. From that day on, Jill's social circle updates 8 times a day, never ceasing to show off her happiness. I looked at my phone expressionlessly. Through Jill's posts, I saw Larry at the edge of the frame, with a relaxed, pampering smile on his face. I could see that Larry had made a home in that villa. They went to IKEA together, buying lots of furniture, beddings, and cushions. My heart grew colder. A month ago, I was diagnosed with a rare disease that prevents any wounds on my body, or else the bleeding won't stop. The doctor said this coagulation disorder is a complication caused by the rare disease. If I bleed too often, I will lose my memory and forget many things. I don't want to forget. So I stayed home, avoiding any accidents. I even lied to Larry, saying my illness might lead to paralysis, and I would need his care for the rest of my life. I thought he would, like 6 years ago at our wedding, firmly say, whether in poverty or wealth, in health or sickness, I will always protect you. But his expression was indifferent. He silently smoked cigarette after cigarette on the balcony. In the end, he only said, "Sally, I won't divorce you, but I need someone to accompany me for the rest of my life and want to have a child. You can't stop me from being with someone else." Chapter 2. The person Larry mentioned was his secretary, Jill. Jill was a poor student I had sponsored for 5 years. She was always grateful to me, visiting me during holidays, and kindly calling me Teacher Dong. After graduating from college, she couldn't find a job. I reached out to my friends and helped her secure a good position. When I introduced it to her, Jill sweetly said, "No need. Teacher Dong, I already found a job. I'm Mr. Lee's secretary." Right in front of me, she affectionately held Larry's arm, smiling innocently. The smile on my face gradually faded. My gaze slowly shifted downwards to the hand that was holding my husband's arm. Larry noticed something was wrong and gently pushed her away, explaining to me, "Sally, Jill just graduated this year. She doesn't know much. She's still a kid. Don't take it to heart. But this kid who doesn't know much intentionally got Larry drunk at the company's annual party and took him to a hotel room. That night, I waited for him at home and didn't sleep a wink. They spent the night entangled in the hotel room. The next morning, Jill called me. Teacher Dong, Mr. Lee got drunk last night. I took him to XX Hotel. Please come and pick him up. I took a taxi to pick him up, opened the hotel room door, and saw Larry lying on the bed, shirtless, with hickeys all over his neck. Jill feigned innocence. Teacher Dong, Mr. Lee was drunk last night. He mistook me for you. It's all my fault. I don't blame him. Furious, I slapped her. Larry rushed over to shield her behind him. Salome, why are you making a scene? Last night was an accident. If you want to blame someone, blame me. Why hit Jill? She's just a secretary. But he didn't see it at all. The little secretary he was protecting was covering her face and secretly giving me a provocative smile. Chapter 3. I shook my head, trying to clear these messy memories from my mind. I continued to bury my head in reviewing the evidence organized on my laptop. For the past 2 years, Larry had been spending money on Jill, buying her designer bags, clothes, and skincare products. I had taken screenshots and gathered evidence of all the expenses. I was curious why Larry didn't hide his relationship with Jill from me. Instead, every penny he spent wasn't hidden from my view. A few months ago, when I asked him this question, Larry just pondered for a moment and then said seriously, Jill is so pure. I don't want her to be the other woman. She is my girlfriend. I suddenly laughed. I couldn't help but ask him, what about me? We've been married for 6 years. What do I mean to you? Larry always looked at me with a pitying gaze, so pitiful it was almost heartless. Sally, you're sick. You can't be with me for the rest of my life. I know you love me, and you wouldn't want to see me end up alone. You'd want to see someone love me, right? At that moment, I understood. Some men are destined to be heartless. After Larry bought a villa for Jill's dog, I decided to get a divorce. I transferred all the money and assets under my name as much as possible, some to my mother and some to my best friend. Even if something happened to me, I wanted them to live well. After organizing the divorce evidence, I drove to the company. The receptionist was surprised to see me, raising an eyebrow and smiling. Mrs. Lee, what brings you here? Long time no see. Usually, when Larry's company had issues, I would come to help strategize and get him through tough times. The veterans in the company all knew that half of the credit for the success of Lee Group belonged to me. I smiled. Where's Larry? The receptionist glanced inside guiltily, her face showing some hesitation. Mr. Lee should still be busy. I stepped forward to go in, but the receptionist hurriedly stopped me. Mrs. Lee, Mr. Lee instructed that no one is allowed to enter. If you have an urgent matter, you can tell me, and I will pass it on for you. I gently tugged at the corner of my mouth, took out a divorce agreement from my bag. I'm here to divorce him. Chapter 4. As soon as I finished speaking, the entire company fell silent. The employees at their desks looked at me in shock, and many began whispering to each other. The receptionist was so stunned that she couldn't close her mouth. Taking advantage of her daze, I walked past her and pushed open Larry's office door. No! The receptionist's voice came too late. The door was already open. Inside the office, Jill was sitting on Larry's lap, his hands tightly around her waist as they kissed passionately. From outside came a series of gasps. The murmurs grew louder. No wonder Mrs. Lee wants a divorce. Mr. Lee is openly cheating in the office. I always suspected something was off with Secretary Zhou. She's just a home-wrecking fox, utterly shameless. The people inside turned around slowly upon hearing the commotion. When they saw me at the door, Larry's face immediately darkened. Salome, what are you doing here at the company? With a cold expression, he ordered the curious employees to get back to work. If anyone continues to watch, go to the finance office to collect your paycheck and get out. Everyone was cautiously observing my expression. They thought I had come specifically to catch them in the act, or that I would put on a dramatic show. But I no longer cared. Without expression, I handed him the divorce agreement in my hand. Larry, review the terms to see if there's anything you want to add. Let's get divorced today. Larry abruptly looked up at me, stunned. After a moment, he chuckled softly. Salome, has your illness fried your brain? Do you know what you're saying? You now have a rare disease. Leaving me. Forget about remarrying. Even survival will be an issue. And besides, after the divorce, you'll have nothing. Are you sure you want to get divorced? I shook my head and laughed coldly. Larry, I suggest you read the terms first. And there's a prenuptial agreement beneath the divorce agreement. Once you read it, you won't say such things. Chapter 5. 6 years ago, when Larry knelt down to propose, he voluntarily handed me a prenuptial agreement. It specifically stated that he would remain faithful to me for life. If he cheated or changed his mind, he would leave with nothing, leaving all the assets to me. All these years, I stayed by his side, never leaving. I watched him go from having nothing as a small employee to becoming a big boss worth millions. It seems he had long forgotten his promise. He had even completely forgotten about the prenuptial agreement. Upon hearing my words, Larry's expression changed slightly, and he lowered his head to check the documents. He roughly flipped through a few pages, his face turning ashen. Seeing he had read enough, I spoke calmly. I consulted with a lawyer. The prenuptial agreement is legally binding. Today, I came for your signature, and by the way, to take back the ownership of the company. My words were firm, but Larry's face grew darker and darker. He gave me a deep look, then approached and laughed. Salome, do you think you can threaten me now? When I wrote that prenuptial agreement, it was just for fun. Do you really think I can hand over such a big company just because I say so? What a joke! Larry sneered and raised his hand, tearing the prenuptial agreement to pieces. Furious, I picked up the ashtray on the table and threw it at him. Larry, you are truly despicable. Larry stood there like a ruffian, laughing and not even dodging as the ashtray flew towards him. It hit him squarely on the forehead, instantly creating a gash, with blood flowing down the side of his face. Larry! Jill, holding a cup of tea at the door and eavesdropping, rushed toward me upon seeing Larry's forehead bleeding. Salome, you shrew, how could you hit Larry? He must be in so much pain with that cut on his forehead. With a face full of concern, Jill tried to approach to comfort him, but Larry stopped her. Jill glared at me with hatred. You shrew, are you crazy for money? Now that you're sick, you can't take care of Larry for life. Why morally bind him? Even if you get divorced, you should leave with nothing. Chapter 6. Jill, seeking revenge for Larry, picked up the shards of the broken teacup from the floor and rushed at me. I'll make you feel Larry's pain too. Seeing the sharp shards about to touch my skin, I realized the danger and hurriedly stepped back, but Jill still came at me fiercely. She lost her balance and nearly fell, the shard cutting into my calf, instantly drawing blood. My face turned pale. I tried to cover the wound with my hand, but the blood kept flowing, and I couldn't stop it. Suddenly, I remembered the doctor's warning. You must avoid any injuries. One of the complications of your rare disease is a blood clotting disorder. If the bleeding doesn't stop, it could be fatal. Panicking, I grabbed tissues from the table and pressed them to the wound on my calf. But soon, the tissues were soaked with blood. Wah wah wah. Jill, standing aside, exaggeratedly held her finger, forcing out a few tears. Larry, my finger is bleeding. What should I do? Larry's face immediately filled with concern, and he lifted her in his arms. Jill, don't be afraid. I'll take you to the hospital right away. As Larry walked past me, I grabbed his pant leg desperately. Larry, call an ambulance for me. If the bleeding doesn't stop, I'll die. Larry paused, turned back, and looked at me coldly. Salome, are you done? It's just a cut, a little blood. Do you really have to curse yourself with death? Don't think that pulling this stunt will make me agree to divorce you. Dream on. Chapter 7. I looked sadly at his hurriedly retreating figure. Jill was cradled in his arms. Before leaving the office, she didn't forget to give me a provocative glance. When Jill picked up the shard, her finger got a small cut, and he made a big fuss about taking her to the hospital. Yet I was bleeding profusely. Larry completely ignored it. It's true what they say. When love is gone, nothing matters. Even if you hang yourself, he'll think you're swinging. In the end, it was the receptionist who called the ambulance for me. By the time it arrived, I had lost so much blood that I had fainted. The young female employees had never seen anything like this before. Pale with fear, they all followed me into the ambulance. I don't know how long it was before I woke up, and when I did, I saw the receptionist with red eyes sitting by my hospital bed. "Mrs. Lee, you're finally awake." My gaze fell on the phone she was holding tightly. It showed dozens of missed calls, all from the contact marked Mr. Lee. I curiously glanced at the 4-bag hanging by my bed. It was a bag of bright red blood, and the wound on my calf had stopped bleeding. "Mrs. Lee, the doctor said you have a blood clotting disorder. You've been unconscious for a whole day and night. We took turns donating blood to you, and that's how the bleeding finally stopped." As she spoke, the receptionist started crying again. "I never expected Mr. Lee to be so heartless. You're so seriously ill, and he hasn't come to see you even once." My brain felt muddled for a moment. It took me a while to realize who she meant by Mr. Lee. Finally, I remembered she was talking about Larry. The doctor was right. If I lose too much blood, I'll start to forget, little by little, about the people and things in my life. If that's the case, I need to act quickly to reclaim the company and all the assets. Since Larry won't agree to sign the divorce agreement or leave with nothing, I'll have to take the legal route. Chapter 8. Over the years, Larry has spent a lot of our joint marital assets on Jill. I intend to reclaim all of it, even if it was donated. I won't let such an ungrateful person benefit. Just as I was contacting the lawyer, the receptionist suddenly ran over with her phone. "Mrs. Lee, something bad has happened. What happened a few days ago has been posted online, and now everyone is insulting you." I looked up. There was a video of a few seconds on the website. It was the scene where I went to the company to find Larry and, in a fit of rage, threw the ashtray at him. The caption said, "This woman is heartless, suffering from a serious illness. Her husband stays by her side, but she is greedy and insatiable. Not only does she want a divorce, but she also wants him to leave with nothing." The comments below were even more outrageous. "I know this woman. She used to be a teacher, but then she probably lost her mind and went into business. I heard she's very cunning. To divorce her husband, she did whatever it took, even sending the student she sponsored to her husband's bed. This woman is terrifying. Whoever marries her is doomed." It was clear that someone had hired bots to smear me. I took screenshots of everything. I sent a copy to the lawyer. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days, and on the 3rd day, I advised the receptionist to stop staying with me and go rest. She felt sorry for me being alone, but she didn't know I had long been accustomed to it. I remember 2 years ago, on our wedding anniversary, I wore a dress Larry had given me. I thought he would like it, but he looked at me with disgust and pushed me away. "Salome, do you think you're still in your 20s? Aren't you afraid people will laugh at you for dressing like this? Now you're at least the wife of a CEO. You should look the part. Don't dress so garishly all the time. You embarrass me." Since then, I voluntarily stayed out of the public eye. When the media interviewed Larry, I would hide far away. At first, he would tell reporters that we started the company together from scratch, but gradually, it became all his achievement. Chapter 9. I also remember when Larry bought a villa for Jill's dog a few days ago. I couldn't help but call him. Before I could say anything, Larry snapped at me. "Salome, are you trying to get back the 20% company shares again? I've already told you. Since you're sick now, just stay home and rest. Don't worry about the company matters. Besides, Jill is a professional and can help me handle work issues. Don't try to get the shares back." Every time I think about this, I feel he is heartless. When we started the business together and the company faced difficulties, he got drunk and felt he couldn't go on. I was the one who negotiated, glass after glass, securing opportunities. When we overcame those difficulties and the company finally rebounded, he hugged me excitedly, his eyes red, promising me, "Honey, I will never let you suffer like this again. I will make you the most enviable CEO's wife, and you will be happy, having whatever you want. But now, I can't even get a divorce. But I still try to remember these moments with Larry. If I don't, I might forget them completely over time. Lying alone in the hospital room, half asleep, someone opened the door. In the dimly lit room, a familiar figure walked in. His name was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't say it as I stared at his face, until Larry sat beside me and spoke softly. "Sally, I haven't visited you these past few days because I wanted to punish you. Always talking about divorce. It seems you've really been spoiled, since you keep thinking about the company matters. I talked to Jill today, and we'll give you back the 20% company shares. From now on, you go your way and she goes hers. You're not allowed to bother her or talk about divorce again." I stared at Larry's pretended calm expression at that moment. I couldn't help but laugh. How could I not know his intentions? But it's a pity that after 6 years of marriage, he still doesn't understand me. Larry, I think I've made it very clear. I don't want the 20% company shares. I want to take back the entire company. Larry, you cheated, and you have to leave with nothing. That was your promise. Chapter 10. Why do you insist on getting a divorce? Larry frowned deeply. Can you still live as well as you do now after leaving me? I let out a bitter laugh. Hidden in the darkness, the Larry I once knew had long disappeared, replaced by someone unrecognizable. He was now convinced that I wouldn't dare to divorce, couldn't divorce, and even believed that I shouldn't divorce. He thought I was like a parasitic vine, unable to survive without him. What a joke. I'm not afraid of dying, so why would I continue to endure this miserable life just for a bit of comfort? Divorce is the only option. Larry, you and I both know our feelings for each other have completely broken down. This is the path you chose yourself. After saying this, I closed my eyes. Larry probably saw that I was unmoved and stubborn. He stared at me silently for a long time. Finally, he left without saying a word. The day I was discharged from the hospital, I called my lawyer and arranged to meet him at a cafe. But before I could leave the hospital, a swarm of media reporters surrounded me. "Mrs. Lee, is it true that you and Mr. Lee are getting divorced? Is it true that you're using all means necessary to divorce Mr. Lee and leave him with nothing? Is it true that you allowed a poor student you sponsored to sleep with your husband? Don't you find that disgusting?" Microphones were thrust in front of me. Suddenly, I felt dizzy. "Please move." I tried to push through the reporters, but they only crowded tighter, giving me no way out. Someone pushed me hard. My hands and knees hit the ground, and blood started flowing. The dizziness intensified. I could only feel hot streams of blood flowing continuously from my hands and knees. There were gasps of horror around me. Blood. So much blood. Chapter 11. All I could see was blood. I was drenched in blood, as if soaked in a pool of it. Amidst the chaotic sounds of panic around me, some were calling for an ambulance, while others were trying to disperse the crowd. I felt strangely calm, thinking that dying like this wouldn't be so bad. There was just a bit of regret. I hadn't managed to divorce Larry. Even in death, I couldn't be a free, wandering spirit. Suddenly, the crowd parted. Someone was running towards me frantically. "Salome!" A nearly hoarse voice almost burst my eardrums. I couldn't help but look up, curious to see who was making such a loud noise. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see his face clearly. Larry's face was frantic, his breathing quick. "Why is there so much blood? Salome, you can't sleep. Wake up!" Someone was furiously pinching my face. I found it very noisy. I wanted to push that person away, but I had no strength. My hands were sticky and couldn't lift. Larry, in a frenzy, picked me up and ran to the hospital. "Salome, hold on a bit longer. Hold on. We're almost at the hospital." I eventually fell asleep. I had a very long dream. I dreamt of my younger self. Someone bought 999 roses and waited at my door for 3 days and nights. My parents disapproved of him because he was poor and didn't want me to marry him, but I was certain he would treat me well all my life. Then I dreamed of our wedding. There weren't many friends or family at the wedding, but we were still very happy, feeling like we had the whole world just by looking at each other. The scene shifted to after we got married. I had been continuously sponsoring a poor student to go to college. What was her name again? I forgot. She was a nice girl, grateful, and visited me during every holiday. But later, what happened later? Chapter 12. I thought I wouldn't wake up this time, but 3 days later, I opened my eyes in the hospital again, looking at the unfamiliar surroundings. I held my head and tried to remember who I was for a long time. Where am I? Hearing a sound, the man beside me jumped up and quickly ran to my bed. Sally, you're awake. I'm sorry. I didn't know you. He rushed over to grab my hand, but I avoided him with a puzzled look. Who are you? As soon as I spoke, Larry froze completely. He looked at me in disbelief. What did you say? I was even more confused. Frowning at him, I asked who you are. I thought to myself, not only is this person inexplicable, but his hearing is also bad. Larry's eyes were red, staring blankly at me. Sally, I know you're mad at me, but please don't tease me, okay? I know I've neglected you these days. If it weren't for the media live stream, I wouldn't have known you bled so much. Sally, I'll be more considerate from now on. I'll spend more time with you. I impatiently covered my ears, not wanting to hear a single word. Who was this person? I didn't know him, and he was being so noisy. It was really annoying. I looked around. Seeing this, Larry immediately asked, "What are you looking for? I'll help you find it." My phone. After a long search, Larry handed me a phone. Sally, your phone. Chapter 13. I happily took the phone and quickly unlocked the screen, dialing my best friend Olivia's number. Olivia, I seem to have been hospitalized for some inexplicable reason. Can you come see me? And there's a strange man next to me who keeps bothering me. Please come and help me get rid of him. The more I spoke, the darker Larry's face became. Not long after, Jill also arrived. She came over and took Larry's arm. Mr. Dong, I didn't know you had a blood clotting disorder. I shouldn't have been so impatient that day. I'm sorry, but I did it for Larry because I care so much about him. That's why I lost control. Can you forgive me? Facing Jill's earnest gaze, I shook my head, looking confused. I don't know you. The two of them were momentarily at a loss. Larry's eyes instantly turned red. He suddenly went crazy, losing control and holding me in his arms. Salome, if you want to play, I can play with you, but speak properly. Don't scare me. I was so scared by him that I started crying loudly. What are you doing? Olivia's voice came from the hallway. She rushed in and hugged me. Olivia checked the red marks on my wrists and, enraged, slapped Larry hard. You're such a beast. You've already hurt Sally to this extent and still won't let her go. What exactly do you want? Larry looked up in shock. Sally is my wife. I love her too much to ever harm her. Olivia laughed coldly. She protected me behind her, pulling out a diagnosis slip from her pocket. How dare you say Sally is your wife? When she was diagnosed with a rare disease, why didn't you say she was your wife? When she needed companionship and help, why didn't you say it then? Now that she's forgotten you, you suddenly come out playing the role of the hurt man in love. What a joke. Chapter 14. Larry seemed unable to accept this fact. His face turned pale, and he shuddered all over. What did you say? She forgot me. How is that possible? Olivia, frustrated and angry, threw the diagnosis slip at his face. Open your eyes and see for yourself. Larry's hands trembled as he unfolded the diagnosis slip. It detailed my condition. After reading it, he was completely devastated. He kept repeating, "How could this happen? How could this happen? Why didn't Sally tell me from the beginning?" Larry looked at me with a face full of guilt, wanting to come over and ask for my forgiveness, but I was already resisting his approach. I just hid behind Olivia, asking her when I could be discharged and when these two strangers would leave my room. Olivia comforted me like a child. Don't worry. As soon as you're fully recovered, we'll leave. Jill couldn't help but sneer. Mr. Dong, stop pretending. This looks very childish. Larry, was she always this good at acting? Just to divorce you? Such extreme measures. Ah. Before she could finish speaking, Larry slapped her hard. Shut up. Larry's face turned ashen as he pointed to the door. We don't need you here. Get out. Larry knelt by my bedside, saying many things I couldn't understand. Finally, he looked defeated, like an old ox. Olivia, why did she forget me but still remember you? Isn't this just a show you're all putting on? Olivia laughed coldly. Do you think too highly of yourself? Do you think you're so important that the whole world needs to put on a show to deceive you? Do you find that amusing? Larry was completely silent. I didn't like him staying in the room, so Olivia drove him away. But Larry refused to leave. He clutched the diagnosis slip tightly, his face pale as he sat in the cold hallway. Chapter 15. That evening, Olivia brought me my favorite food. After dinner, can I come over to your place and play? Is that okay? I remember you said we would play the socializing game, and when it's over, you'll give me all the money, right? Olivia was taken aback for a moment, then smiled knowingly. Sure, the doctor said my memory stopped 6 years ago. Many things that happened in the past 6 years, I had selectively forgotten. During dinner, Larry set up my bowl and chopsticks, poured water, and gently reminded me, Sally, stop looking at your phone and eat properly. I ignored him entirely, laughing out loud at something on my phone. I showed a post from my social media to Larry, laughing so hard my stomach hurt. Look at this. It's so funny. This guy bought a villa for his secretary's dog. Ha ha ha. Larry didn't laugh. Instead, his eyes turned red as he stared at me, his brows furrowed. When Olivia told me this story, I realized there are such fools in the world, neglecting his own wife and spending millions on someone else's dog. Olivia asked me what I thought. But it's obvious, isn't it? Even a child could see that the man wants to make his secretary his wife. He doesn't want his original wife anymore. I shook my head in disbelief and put down my phone. Just as I was about to eat properly, someone grabbed my arm tightly. Larry was in tears, crying uncontrollably. No, Sally, that person still wants his wife. Chapter 16. Impossible. I slammed down my chopsticks, thinking he was wrong. Even a 3-year-old knows that where a man's money goes, his heart follows, right? Even if that man's wife didn't see what happened between them, she must have already guessed that the man has changed his heart. If it were me, I wouldn't want such a man as my husband, even if it killed me. After saying this, I continued to enjoy my meal, but the person beside me was stiff, like a stone. The doctor said I had amnesia, that I couldn't remember many things. I often held my head thinking for a long time, not noticing anything missing in my mind. It still felt like life was the same as before. After dinner, I went to play with Olivia, but unlike before, she now had to work every day and was busier than ever. And that inexplicable man kept coming to see me every now and then. He would often cry with red eyes, and he would call my name, asking for my forgiveness. Once, I couldn't understand and turned to ask him, You keep asking for my forgiveness, but why don't you tell me what you did wrong? Larry was completely stunned. He thought for a long time. Sally, my biggest mistake was pushing you away, being blinded by delusions, blind in heart and eyes. Now I have completely severed ties with Jill. I have already taken back that villa. Sally, I saw your diary and the divorce agreement in the bedside drawer at home. I looked carefully. Besides the divorce, I agree to everything else you want, okay? I don't even want the company anymore. I'll give it to you too. Just please get better quickly. Remember me, okay? I shook my head. He said too much, and it was all such nonsense. I couldn't remember any of it. Chapter 17. Larry still insisted on taking me back from Olivia's house. Sally is still my wife. We haven't divorced yet, and it's not appropriate for her to live in someone else's home. Olivia shielded me behind her and asked for my opinion, whether I wanted to go with him. I quickly shook my head. I don't want to. I don't like this man. Larry's face turned ashen. He stared at me blankly, his eyes reddening once more. I disliked him even more. Later, Olivia helped me buy a bigger house, saying that the money for the house came from my ex-husband. He sold the company. He also agreed to divorce me. I asked her why. Did Larry go back to Jill? Or did he go to the secretary's dog? Olivia chuckled. Then her eyes turned red. He died. He was distracted on the way back and got into a car accident. Before he died, he decided to donate his organs to you, to help cure your rare disease. Sally. I heard the young secretary was pregnant with his child, but Larry refused to acknowledge it. He said it was just a fling, and you were his only wife. If you knew all this when you were clear-headed, would you choose to forgive him? I shook my head. In fact, after the surgery, when my body recovered, all those memories came flooding back. I knew that during my period of amnesia, Larry had been trying to make amends and seek my forgiveness after learning the truth. I knew he had sent the pregnant Jill to have an abortion and had cut ties with her completely. I also knew he genuinely regretted it, but I wouldn't forgive him, because his regrets and apologies couldn't make up for the pain I had endured.